actually they wanted us to give them that piece of property.
And the FAA won't let them use it. And since that promise was made, if it was ever made, the FAA has changed their stance on sale of property significantly. However, even though they changed their stance, they still would not let a dorm be put on that property.
Is it liability?
Dorm goes up in height, and it's in the RPZ kind of upside down steps, if you will. And so the way they have designed the PUD, they got low-lying stuff and 3-story stuff. The 3-story stuff is stacked in a way that it's underneath the upside down running cages that the FAA not actually designed.
Which is only the sales side, 5%. Found that out today.
True.
The whole thing's
I was pleased that the city was looking to help out other governmental entities. Those unseen, constant.
I heard you offered to take the road.
I did.
College grad.
Of course, that was
there.
from my desk, not the Game of Five.
Yeah.
But, eventually it may have moved that way.
Right.
Trying to keep.
I love how Jack, it's either Jack or Dan that comes in on 2
You
wheels.
all saw that episode. You tried to buy a pair of shoes. That's my life. Every day. Every day.
Yes.
Hawthorne needs a new pair of shoes. Hawthorne needs a new pair of shoes.
You got ready to throw some ice when you say that?
He has to get Radar or Rabbit, but to get Radar or Rabbit, he has to get cleaner or dress. To get cleaner or dress, he has to get the dentist, the cabinet, and then one thing breaks, and then the whole tree breaks. And all that is a pair of shoes.
This is all because it's all what's in those ones.
Yeah.
Well, not really. You're right.
You got 5:30.
At 1 point.
Oh, 5:30, all right.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's Monday, June 3rd, 5:30, and I ask for mercy and grace.
Amen.
With that being said, can I ask for Jack to give the invocation?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the ability to be here this afternoon on this beautiful day. We pray that you give us wisdom and knowledge and guidance through the issues that are discussed today. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to be rolling into is to review the proposed budget for 2025 with our city manager, Al Minner.
There you go. So first out of the gate, I have to give a whole bunch of exceptions, and I get the right to change numbers and maneuver. Long ago, when the city was putting together the Electric Advisory Board, the purpose behind it was to show the state legislature that the city of Leesburg is moving more into an authority-type model in operating our municipal electric utility, which has both corporate and unincorporated electric customers. This is a model that more recently the state legislature wants to see, as a lot of the legislation the past 2 sessions has dealt with taking away authority from municipal electric utilities, making it penal based on whether you have an authority, so on and so forth. And Mark, in his application, I'm going to share this conversation, asked, is this going to be a real committee that actually has authority, or are you all just wasting your time? So today is, you all are a real committee, and that is one of the reasons why I'm putting these caveats out, because y'all are new to the budget process. And typically the information that I am sharing with you this evening has 30 more days to cook. But because you guys meet the first Monday of the month and we're trying to get a budget review past you, which goes and talks about rates, it's not done. And it's a long way from being done, but we've got like 60 to 90 days really before things need to get solidified. So out of the gate, I'm going to hit you with the bottom lines, that this thing ain't done, and these are all my concerns. The City Commission, please forgive me, has not heard this, so you're the first to hear it. So Mark, you guys are a real committee. You're the first to hear it. Electric Department hasn't even heard it yet. They got a lot of influence in this, but basically the only three people who know about what's going to be shared is myself, Brandy, and Jim Williams. And I even have a couple more gray hairs over it, if you believe it or not. So with that said, we are working on the fiscal year 25 budget is what you all are going to be reviewing. These are my overall concerns that I don't have answers for you this evening. And I was slightly hesitant in sharing this, but because Mark wanted to ensure that this was a real committee, I'm throwing it at you. So these are my concerns. No matter how horrible it makes us sound or unprepared or whatever, I'll argue the opposite, but here are my concerns. There is a significant concern I have with how we've been doing our budget forecasting. And typically what we do is we take total revenues, divide it by our wholesale purchases, we come up with a percentage, and we want a percentage to be around 62%. So 62% of wholesale purchases are part of our revenue. We've used that model for a long time. A couple of years we've gotten a little bit wonky with it, but right now I'm questioning that model because the numbers aren't stacking up. I'll get into that in detail if you want. So one of the examples is the current budget that you looked at has a total budget of $48.5 million in sales and $78 million in revenue. Well, in all honesty, we've never seen $78 million in revenue, barring when the power cost adjustment went way crazy high. So on a surface level, the percentages might be right, but on an actual matched level, we're getting data from two different sources. One is Doug Hanley, our consultant, and the other is Jim Williams, and our F&P numbers, F&PA numbers, and they're significantly different. That's giving me cause that makes me wonder if that number is correct. If that number's incorrect, then we've got a deficit, even though what you looked at is a balanced budget. I think all that makes sense to me. I tried to explain it as simply as I can to you. Next thing I'm worried about is the contribution and aid agreements. We've tipped you off a little bit about what the contribution and aids agreements are. There's a policy that comes through that says if you develop, we're going to ROI in 4 years. These are things that the city will pay for. These are things that developers will pay for. The same kind of hole in the bucket is potentially in those developer contributions. So if we're underestimating not just material costs, if that number's not right, but if we're also having a leak in our revenue numbers on what houses are using these days, then our ROI number's wrong. So if our ROI number's wrong, then we're not asking for enough contribution from developers. So we've kind of tackled here recently the operations, a transformer is X bucks, now we're charging X bucks. Now we're going to start writing that there's a delta even if that number's off in the developer contribution age. But if our revenue numbers are off, that's another potential leak because our ROI numbers are off. So we need to look at that. Why I'm concerned about that, I got a chart to show you. So these are all my concerns, all the data I'm going to throw at you at the end to back up my concerns. We really haven't seen full-scale growth in the electric department. I know that may sound foreign to you because if you listen to the meetings, you hear all the PUDs that get approved, and we got 43,000 lots, and traffic is crazy, and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell you, what you hear from the public and their perceptions about Leesburg growth is not reality. Where we have sustained growth for the past couple of years is the villages. When the villages growth goes away, you will see our numbers click back to traditional growth numbers, 3%, 2%, 4%. If you listen to Dan Miller's presentation at the last meeting about the comp plan, he talked about those numbers. He estimated that growth over Leesburg is 4%. Well, guess what? Those numbers don't include the villages. So we've seen significant growth. Our initial number back from the appraiser's office, June 1, is 38% growth. All of that, 90% of that, is all villages.
It's ad valorem.
Ad valorem. Yep, it's the ad valorem number. So that also now has an impact in the electric fund. So that's actually 7 concerns, because that's going. Well, it's number 6. All that growth stuff in the general fund side of the house equals transfer numbers. So that's the 6th concern. With these concerns, do we need to look at a rate increase for this year? Our last rate increase was fiscal year 22, which would have been October 1, is about a 5% increase. Or do we need to just kind of batten down the hatches, watch some of our expenses, let some of these blips of growth, now I go back to growth, right? But this is not Leesburg growth, this is electric territory growth, which most of it we're seeing in Fruitland Park before we're seeing it here. So those growth issues have an impact. We can talk about that. So potential rate increase versus do we need to just kind of pump the brakes? So now you're going to say, well, Minner, the electric department was screaming about needing a transformer at North Sub. It's cost $1 million. I'm going to tell you here on this one, wants versus needs. You're going to hear the electric department say, we got to have that transformer. You're going to hear me say, that's a want, not a need. And I'm going to tell you that because we got different ways we can feed the system. What the electric department is telling you is we got to have it, this is optimal. But optimal in the electric department is not practical sometimes. And if we go with what's optimal, then that will lead to rate increase. And it's not my decision or the electric department where you want to set the rate. That's your decision, and that's the city commission's decision. And we need to balance out these competing demands. Rates versus what's optimal and what's not. So that's what I mean by comparative CIPs. So we need to go back and we need to look at that some more for fiscal year 25. Operational issues. Really, the lion's share of the electric fund is one thing, power cost supply, which goes to the number 1 concern. That's why I started out there. Once you get past operation, or paying the power bill, then your next thing is you got to pay debt. Those are fixed costs. We fix our costs with generation and power supply through our FMPA contracts, and we fix our debt because that's our credit card and we have to pay that. Where we can trim is operational savings. And there's really only going to be 3 potential areas in operational savings. Big expense is our tree trimming, so we've got to look at probably bringing some of that internal, so that we need to slim back on the Lewis contract. So you'll see this in the contractual line. And we need to probably trim back on some of our expenses we've been doing with Team Fishel. So if we do internal stuff to fix the system or aids in contribution, we're using Team Fishel to work with us so we can spread our manpower anywhere. I'm going to say we need to pull that back a little bit. And we need to have our crews start doing some of this other work to save some money. And meanwhile, that also is going to affect overtime. We're spending too much on overtime. We got to trim some of that back. Those are my costs. That's the bottom. These 6 bullet points are the areas that in the next 30 days are going to get the significant comb. So with that being said, everything else I'm about to show you is still under review for the next 30 days. And you'll probably get a second swipe at this depending on how the July meeting falls versus the budget workshops, if you all want another second view in July. Okay, so now I'm going to start showing you a series of the graphs and charts that set up the concerns that I just mentioned. This is the electric fund reserve cash. This is what I call the good chart. I'm going to show you another chart that Brandy likes. That's the bad chart. So you guys are getting it all here. You're getting my opinions, and you're getting staff opinions. You're getting the total whole Monty here, not boiled down by the city manager, okay? So This I call the good chart. What I'm going to say is bad about this chart is from March 21, we were sitting around $22 million in the bank. Now we only have, call that about 10.5 million. So there's a $10 million bleed. Where did that money go? I'm going to tell you, it went to a bunch of different spots. One, in that time frame, was paying the power bill when gas went wonky. Two, it went to capital improvement projects. And two can be broke down into capital improvement projects of fixing the system, or capital improvement projects in aids and contribution, expanding the system based on developer requests. I don't think I put that chart in there tonight, developer requests, but in short, we've got about $2.5 million that's hanging out that's not spinning any meters. One of them is the, what's Silver Lake called? Silver Lake Point is a new residential subdivision we put about $1 million into. It's not spinning, it was 300 and some odd houses. It's not spinning any meters yet. I'm going to tell you in a brief overall why, because they got into trouble with Duke and moving a pole, a transmission pole, which affected their ingress egress. Duke said, yeah, we'll move the pole, but it'll cost $8 million. Was that the right number, Chris? $8 million. The developer said, I guess we're not moving that pole. So when you drive down 44 and you see those big giant poles that are like 60 feet tall, I think they're metal, right? Or cast iron, and you know, this wide, Duke will move it for you, but costs $8 million. So that's a real number. When you move transmission poles, it's super expensive. So now I'm going to digress. If you ever thought about undergrounding the transmission line on 27 to make our 27 corridor look more like Winter Park, you're never going to do it because there's probably 20 transmission poles from the north of city limits at Walmart to where that transmission line turns at 48-ish, or Dixie turns in there. You can just count 8 million, right? Underground. So yeah, we're not doing that project. Okay, so I digress a little bit. What I like about this chart is it shows where we're at in reference to how much cash we have, 10 million bucks. This line is how much cash we're supposed to have, about 9 million bucks, right? When I say supposed to have, that means what the GFO recommendation is. But in electric fund, it's what the GFO recommendation is and what we say it's going to be, and then our bond creditors, remember we've got A+ bond rating, they want to make sure that we have that minimum amount of cash because that affects our bond rating. So that's significant. When this number starts leaking below the minimum requirement, that's a problem. So what this number shows, though, is this blue line recommends the BCPA. How much money is in the BCPA? Remember, our goal is we want this blue line to be straight at 3 million bucks. And it typically does that. But like, for example, let me just go to March 20. We had about 5 million in the BCPA account, and we had $20 million total cash. Okay, Brandy's going to tell you, no, we only had $15 million cash for electric operations because 5 million of that is the BCPA. But I wanted to put this number in here because not only do we need to watch the cash number, we need to watch for the BCPA and what those general reserve numbers are. So here, when it was high, I'll show you another corresponding court saying, well, we lowered the BCPA and we gave money back to the customers. And then even though this looks like a little short line, you know, from 20 to about, for a good year, we held it almost at 3 million bucks until the gas, you see the corresponding decrease. So when it hit about here, that's when I screamed and said, oh, we really got to collect money.
Quick question for those watching and for myself as well. Can you explain what BCPA is?
The BCPA is the bulk power cost adjustment. The bulk power cost adjustment is a flat charge per kilowatt that is on your bill that we collect that goes up and down elastically based on what the cost of electricity is.
And that's over 1,000.
No, that's per kilowatt. Okay, so right now it's 1 cent per kilowatt. So if you have a 1,000 kilowatt bill, your power cost adjustment portion is $10.
So, kind of getting to probably, I think I understand the difference in viewpoint from you and Brandy with the 5 million. Like, we shouldn't count it, right?
Right.
Which would imply that we have like $3 million of cash or whatever.
Right.
I kind of get that, but how much cash above required reserves are in like gas and general fund roughly?
Roughly.
I mean, is it more than $5 million?
3 or 4? Oh man, I don't. Do you want me to hazard guesses for you?
I mean, I'm just wondering. Like, I'm just thinking. Like, okay, if you're gonna play it the way you are, which I tend to agree with, given that you have a lever in the BPCA to fix this, right? If it becomes an issue, probably just needs to happen faster than last time, and it would, given that we have less cash, so you can't shut down. Like in an emergency, you just loan money from the gas fund if you need a month or two to float because something crazy happens with your cash due to fuel costs.
Yes, we've thought about that.
I mean, you ideally wouldn't, but
So we've thought about that. So Dan's saying we can borrow from other funds to float stuff and then kick it back to make the books look good. And yes, we could do that. Rough numbers, like the general fund right now, sitting on 15 million. 11 above reserve. So there's some money over there in the general fund.
And then gas is only at like 1.7, but we're building that back up.
yeah.
And gas took a little hit because of the lawsuit and the expansions with the villages, so
Yeah.
we're waiting on those to come back.
Yeah.
Water and sewer probably sitting at maybe 4 or 5 million above the reserve each. These are super rough numbers. And after airport fund, they're sitting on 4 million cash. So in every fund too, like 4 million cash above reserve in the airport, man, that's a boatload of change.
Yeah.
4 million above the reserve fund in electric is not. Where I think this number needs to hang out, we don't need to have 20, but we need to, I think we 10 to 15 is where this needs to hang out constant.
And that makes sense. And I'm not suggesting that you actually do that, but like in a worst case scenario, like there's some sort of crazy fuel spike again, although FMP is now hedged further, so you'd have more time to react.
Yep. And why the 10 to 15? Because if you have a crazy storm that bunch of trees come and you got to spend a bunch on getting debris out, you're probably going to need $3 to $5 million to clean up a storm before you start getting your FEMA reimbursement. So that's kind of like cash on hand for a crazy contingency. And then everything the electric department does is in the millions, so you can have plus or minus swings. So that account sitting at 10 or 15 million bucks honestly makes me sleep at night. So what does the chart look like? So now you're looking, well, Al is sitting at 10, right? Look, that's where you want it. No, take out the BCPA fund. So we're sitting at 5.5. So that's the difference. So this shows you the exact number that we have. This shows you what we have with BCPA. So Brad will come in and say, well, Al, I'm sitting on, he'll use my chart against me. He'll say, I'm sitting on 10 million bucks. I'm going to say 10 million minus 5. That's what you're sitting on. So kind of the difference in look. So this one's alarming because as of March 24, we're actually below what the reserve requirement is by about 2 million bucks.
Is that how they calculate?
Yes. They being credit ratings.
Ratings.
Yes.
So that does.
That does need to come up. Okay, so that's cash. So cash has got me a little wigged out. Let's talk about historic sales. I didn't put in fiscal year 24 on this, but this breaks down sales October through November. Each color represents a different fiscal year. Look at that number. 2.1% growth. It hasn't changed. I put 2 more years on that. It's still about 2% growth. So when I told you the other meeting that weather still outpaces our growth, you see that constant. 2 fiscal years ago, we sold 527 million kilowatt hours. This year, with growth, we're only estimating 519 million kilowatts. So that's where the weather can change us quicker than growth. So when we do these budget estimates for revenues and wholesales, we really got to tie it back, I think, to the historical trend. What this year's budget does is I think it projected us at about 530 million kilowatts in sales. We've never done that. Never, ever. And our customer base has only gone up from, and I don't think I put this number in the chart, but our customer base in 2013 was 25,000 customers. Our customer base today is 27,900. So subtract that, that's 2,700, divided by 10, divided by that number, and that growth rate, it's relatively small. And if you look at the customer base, like for example, in Brad's chart on Aiden contributions, where he's got $1 million in this project, $1 million in this project, that's only 300 customers. So we've got $1 million out for a potential return of 4 customers. Was our Aiden contribution numbers correct? So those things we need to beat up. And my guess is we've been kind of just dealing on historic data. So even though the math is right, we're using older data. And the phenomena that's going on in the electric industry is even though you have more stuff in your house, all the stuff in your house is more efficient. Your air conditioner's more efficient, your computer's more efficient, your TV's more efficient, your lights are LED. So even though you're running more stuff, you're using less electricity. So when 15 years ago, remember, we planned power resources out 20 years in advance. So back in 2000, when we were planning for 24, we saw 3% growth, but we're not getting 3% growth. And what that has done, I think, in the marketplace is it's made the investor-owned utilities, who are fighting the same fights that we are, and probably even worse, because now they have the solar issue on top of it.
Yeah, it's worse.
So they're holding the buckets even more. So what's that done to the investor-owned utilities, specifically FPL? That's charged them up to go look for more market share. So they go off and see their local state representatives and say they're not getting their fair share of the pie, or these evil municipal utilities who transfer money haphazardly into their general funds. It's taxation without representation. You got to stop them, and that's so that they can take muni pieces of the pie, which are all fixed because every square inch of the state has got a territorial agreement. So, and what have we seen FPL do? We saw FPL take Northwest Electric, whatever that thing with Gulf Electric or whatever. We saw them try to take over JEA. We saw them take over Vero. So that fight, even though some of those stories I'm telling you are 2 or 3 years old, in the electric industry, those fights still burn in Tallahassee. And as the trends continue to not go match the resources, the investor-owned utilities get mad, and they, maybe reasonably as they should, force munis to tighten up their numbers. As a result, we've tightened up our numbers, and what we've tried to do is decrease our rate and decrease our transfer so that our utility looks more like an investor-owned utility and our general fund looks more like a municipal corporation that doesn't have a utility. Okay, so now let's talk about the bulk power cost adjustment, because there was lots of screaming.
Hey, one thing just to add there, because I think it's also important and something I was considering after the last meeting, is that it's not just the growth. The problem is the actual dollars. It's the only thing that is less. 'Cause when you started, 1,000 kW bill was like 138 in Leesburg. Rate was like 138.
It was
139.
138 going to 142.
142, and now
Something
it's
like
like 120.
It's 117.94.
So yeah,
it
so
96?
I mean, of course there are ups and downs, but overall, your electric bill on a per kilowatt hour is the same or lower than it was 10 years ago.
So having
and I think that's screwing up your revenue. And you talk about these ROI calculations. Your materials have gone up, your labor's gone up, but that 2.7 is maybe even wiped out.
I don't know if you want me to say this, but you put that out there. So with what all Dan said, that might mean there's room for a $10 increase in the base fees, the customer charge.
So,
and we might need to look at that for fiscal year 25.
$15 charge?
Yes, that might need to go to 25. I'm not saying that we're doing this,
Yeah.
but I'm saying we need to look at it. And maybe we need
But
to,
yeah.
maybe we kick the can for a year, maybe we two-step it, I don't know. But that's next 30 days, we're going to be looking at that. Because we'll show you the next chart, so we'll come to that. So Dan, I want to talk about BCPA. Now, another piece of the puzzle, BCPA. The BCPA is only recovering what we need pursuant to the relationship of our power supply costs. That's what this chart is showing you. So if you're ever asked, well, the city keeps raising and keeps playing with the BCPA. Yeah, we do. We're not making any money on the BCPA. The BCPA is a pass-through based on sales, based on our numbers we get. So this is a historic chart. This goes all the way back to October 15. The orange line is in millions. So in October of 15, we had almost $10 million in the Power Cost Adjustment Fund. Dude, that is way too much. Remember, 3 million is our rule of thumb. We want to keep that line at 3 million, and we did it a couple times. So if it's above 3, we got to give money back, and we got to lower the BCPA. So that's what the blue line represents what the Power Cost Adjustment charge. So when we were sitting on 10 million in cash in the BCPA, the Power Cost Adjustment was about 1.3 cents, or 13 bucks per thousand. So we said, you know what, we need to give it back. So we dropped it to 0 and bled it down to about 3 million, and then we put it back up to about where we started, about 15 cents. There was a little hiccup there, but we held it pretty steady. We saw we were growing. We dropped it again, and then we dropped it again to keep it around 3 million. Now, when we got back to 3 million, we go back up, and then this time frame in here, January 21, that time frame was when gas started going crazy. So we're down here, 10 million in the hole. So we go, we go 10 million in the hole. So we go back up to the crazy power cost adjustment fee to 7 cents a kilowatt, or 70 bucks per thousand. We held that steady while we were recouping our money. And then as soon as we got to where we thought we needed to be, we knocked it down, not once, twice, 3 times. So now we're back to a penny a kW. And our long-range recommendation, because of things that Dan just talked about, F&PA's hedging, our power costs, and what you'll see here is this chart correlates totally to the BCPA chart. So when you see this number crazy, this is what we were paying for power, $110 and $97 a megawatt. So once F&PA got that under control, the trend for this year is $79 to finish off this fiscal year, and the next year our projection is $81. So these numbers are pretty close. So look at so you see our history. So we used to hang out around, I guess that would average out at 75. Then we got those 2 whacks, and now we're kind of adjusted. We're probably going to hang out around 80, 85 moving forward. This price is pretty much fixed, I want to say, through the middle of 25. And then, in the next, actually now over at F&PA, they're talking about how we move out to the next chunk blocks. But our anticipation is we're going to hang out around here for a little while.
And I'll just point out, because historically, you notice that 2024 trend, $79, is higher than the 2021 back. But yet our electric rate is lower, and that's because the electric fund is not subsidizing the general fund anymore.
As much,
yeah. So we used to have cheaper power call.
So this chart, it goes to the electric transfer, percentage versus dollars. And so what we see is we've lowered the percentage. So when I started in 13, we're transferring 5 million, and that was about 8.5% that we were kicking in. The policy at that time said 10%. Mind you, in 22 or 21, right before Dan got off the city commission, we passed the referendums, the 2 referendum questions, which were designed to do 2 things. One, it was designed to recognize we want the general fund to operate as a municipal corporation without a significant transfer, 6%. So what 6% represents is if you are a municipal corporation, you have a franchise fee with your utility provider pursuant to state statutes, which gives other non-municipal other utilities, because other utilities who provide electric service in a municipal corporation, it provides the franchise right and the right to use the right-of-ways. In short, that number across the state is 6%. Why is it 6%? Have no idea. Because when cities started giving their rights to investor-owned utilities to sell electric instead of them, they made long-term agreements that said 6%. And that's the number we've copied. For fiscal year 25, because of the legislation that's happened the last 2 years, I actually am trying to recommend to this body as well as the city that we lower it from 6% to closer to 3%. Why? Because if one day we're forced to operate totally like a municipal corporation, we can't be taking any money from unincorporated customers and putting it into the general fund. Now, we don't have to do that yet. So this is kind of, I'm being draconian here in this recommendation, okay? I think that day is coming. I think that legislation is going to be passed sooner rather than later. So what does that mean? That means 60% of our customers are outside the city limits in unincorporated or incorporated Lake County. So they're in Fruitland Park or they're in unincorporated Lake. That's Tim. He's not here. Okay? But our sales are the inverse. 60% of our sales are in the city limits. So we need to take 6% of our sales, which equals about 3% transfer. That's where we're trying to go. If we can get there, I don't know. We tried to this year because we say the $1.6 million transfer. So we are attempting to do that this year. And we're attempting to do that this year. Other stuff in here. Here's your electric debt. So, you know, there's your principal balance payments. That's what we got to pay. That's what we've got hanging out. That does just tell you the balances. It doesn't tell you what the payment is. What?
Debt is around 3.7.
So 3.7 million bucks total, which is paying all those bills.
I mean,
it's not crazy.
no, but you ought to be able to kick something back to the general fund, just like Duke kicks a dividend back to its shareholders.
Can we pontificate about that later?
Yeah, I mean, there should be a number. Maybe it's not 6.
So here's where we're at. This is our initial swag at the budget. Electric department says 78 million plus miscellaneous stuff for a total operating budget of 79.9 million. This is the number that is under my microscope as we speak. I think this number is $10 million inflated based on revenues. Why I do that is because if you go back to...
Oh, you think it's 78 or the 88?
I think it's 68. This number is way inflated.
What do you think 23, 24 is going to be?
I think 23, 24.
I mean, you should have a pretty good idea right now.
I think 23, 24 is going to be about 74 mil.
So,
No. Yeah, you did say 74, Brandy, for actual. But remember, that still has a little bit of high power cost adjustment in there.
yeah.
So that's not a good number. What
I understand.
the numbers that we're looking at, we're looking to sell this year 511 million kilowatt hours. The trend is 519.
But hold on, if you do 74 and 62% of it or whatever it is power costs, is wholesale power, so roughly 8 or 9 million, isn't that going to leave you like a $4 or $5 million hole?
You're exactly right, 5 million. So we're doing that.
Yes.
What's the answer to your $5 million hole?
Reduce the transfer.
I know, but that's
increase
this
the
year.
rate.
That's not next year. That's 23, 24.
This year we got the transfer the same amount.
And we stopped transferring,
We took
so we got some money going back in.
500,000 back, and only gave 500 back.
So that's helping some of that.
have vacancies, and that's all we do.
So I don't have
You
an
don't know
immediate.
how you're going to fix
I don't
the
know.
hole this year.
I don't know how I'm going to fix the hole this year.
We're trying to stop cap slow down.
Okay.
So that's in the next chart.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the numbers we need to tighten up on. And just for comparison purposes, 1% growth on our total sales is 519 million kilowatts. We did that number back in 19. And so the corresponding numbers, we can kind of draw some comparisons there. So look, all bets are off right now. We got some homework.
It's relatively minuscule, but what are the miscellaneous and the other, and why are they up so much?
Interest is the miscellaneous. Interest earnings are up a lot, that's in the miscellaneous. And then,
Interest is miscellaneous?
yes,
Interest on the cash on hand?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the contributions are in the other sources, and that would be developer, the CAIC, as you call it.
Paybacks? Thank you.
Okay, so then we break it down into expenses. So this one shows these two are the power numbers, St. Lucie plus all requirements project, then all the, miscellaneous stuff. So where we're at, this is where we're at for capital. So this is kind of where the rubber's hitting the road, and this is kind of where we're squeezing down. We explained the three-legged stool in capital: system expansion, forced by development, things that go bump in the night. This stool number one: storm comes, transformer blows out, we got to replace the transformer, and then system improvements that we want to make. What this basically represents, this capital plan is, it's a preparation for pretty much things that go bump in the night and nothing else. Because the plan is trying to build our cash and address the $5 million hole. So why? Why can't we just go King's X, no more capital? Because we have totally spent and we have made significant capital improvements since 2018. What do all those numbers add up to? A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
So this is another example of when I say, well, Brad's going to tell you we need a transformer. I'm going to say we've put, what'd you say, 50 million? We put 50 million into the system. What else do we need to do? It's like, that's the pump the brakes. Let's figure out where we're at. So, and I'm going to repeat this again and again. The difference between the city manager and the department head is the city manager's charged with giving you a recommendation on where you make risk. The department head is not. Okay? That's not demeaning. You don't pay Brad to say, let's cut that. You pay Brad to say, this is what we need. And that goes for every department head. We now pay Joe Iozzi to say how many police officers you want. You have the city manager to interpret that for you and remind you, well, if you do what the department head wants, then taxes will have to go up, or this fee will have to change, or that has to be. So every year we have to collectively decide what we're going to mitigate. That's the difference between the department recommendation and the manager recommendation. A lot of times they're spot on. This year I'm going to suggest to you that we're going to vary significantly in the electric fund. So when Brad says I need a transformer, I'm going to say, dude, we just spent 50 million. You got to chill.
55. 55.
So that's the end of the presentation. I don't think it's as bleak as it sounds. There's some areas in there that I think we have a bead on that we need to go back and look on, and in July we'll be closer. Any questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the villages factor? How long is it going to be a factor for? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? What's your estimate?
Okay, that question takes us out of the Electric Advisory Board, is my preface. Because everything the village is doing, we've already accomplished in the electric side. In fact, that was part of one of the reasons for the debt issue, was to expand to them, ROI it, build the system, which is actually in Suffolk County, which is the villages of Catherine?
So as you put it, every potential meter is now spinning?
Every potential village's meter that is in the city of Leesburg's electric territory, Fruitland Park, and Sumter County is spinning.
But I would say the flip side is that 38% growth. We got a couple more years of that, and that ad valorem helps the transfer not be needed.
Yes, that's the other side. So
That comes forever.
So on the electric side of the house, we're done pretty much with it. I can say this, with the electric side of the house, we will never spin another village's electric meter. Never say never, right? We'll never spin another electric meter because their territory, the village's territory, roughly 44 to Center Hill, Lake Sumter, 301, that box that they own. The only portions of that box that are in our electric territory are the villages of Catherine and Fruitland Park. Even the city of Leesburg property that's in that box, and the property, Secret Promises, Denham Village, and the little spots in Lake County, because now they have in Lake County, in the box, they have villages of Fruitland Park, villages of Westlake, Secret Promise, what used to be Renaissance Trails, and then the end of our ISBA territory, and then they have Mascot property below Bridges Road. So they have a big swath still in Lake County, but all of that, I will go out on a limb and say it's either Duke territory or Seco territory. So we will not spin a single village's meter in Lake County or Sumter County in the future unless we come up with the greatest brainstorm that encourages a territorial swap, which I don't think is happening. So that's the electric answer. The general fund answer is every bit of growth that we saw last year, or I'll say 95% of growth that we saw last year, our number was 23%. This year we saw 38%. That's a total increase in taxable base of about $890 million. We're going to get what the little piece that we're missing is there's about 500 houses more to go in the villages of Westlake. So it's the villages is 500 times 299, 199. That's the average that we've been getting. It's that, which is 50 million. So we'll get maybe 50 million more in taxable value for next year.
This year's taxable value is January
This is
1,
huge.
2023, isn't it?
No, it's like 723 million.
No, but it's January 1, 2023 is the numbers you're seeing this year.
Everything sold to December 31st, 23.
Okay, it's December 31st, 23.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
all.
you had the wrong date.
Okay, all right.
Wrong year.
Yeah,
Right
okay.
day.
Yeah, January 20.
So there's still 500 more. So we'll see that next year, but we've got the lion's share. So when the villages is all said and done, probably upwards of just south of $1 billion in new investment. Oh, by the way, that performer's overperforming. We thought I think when we did the presentation to the commission, we thought like it's 750 million in new taxable value when we sold them the property. So that performance overperforming. And then now you're going to see Secret Promises. And so you'll see more Villages stuff in the future. But my guess is you probably won't see Villages investment back in Lake County until they build in the block from 470 up to 44, all that Baxley property, and where they're masquerading now by the school. So all that's going to get filled in at the clip of, 270 houses a month. So that's, I don't know how many houses a year, 3,500, 4,000. And so that will fill in, and then they'll jump back over. If that pace continues, there's no reason to think at this stage it won't continue, but I think in the general fund, we have to deal with what we've got until the Villages movement starts again.
I had a quick question. So regarding what is going to be coming up in the future as far as voting on this or going over this further, we're all suffering from inflation. All of us here are business owners or people who run businesses. So when is the call going to be made as far as optimization versus rate increase? Because I feel like the problem that happened in 2022 is that people weren't informed. And so I know that we've decided to be better about communicating that, but I'm just curious to see what kind of headway or a warning is going to be given to people who are going to have that rate increase?
If there's a rate increase.
Yes.
If
Yes.
that's significant,
Yes.
acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
If there's a rate increase.
There's a rate increase.
Then I would say it would be approved by the commission sometime in August, giving customers about 60 days notice.
Okay.
In reality, I mean, your July budget.
Any rate
They're gonna-
increase would be effective October 1, which would come on. So that's why I went back to this side, because we slipped over it pretty quick. This is the chart. So do we have space in the rate? These are as of May. Right now, Leesburg is the lowest cost provider in the region when compared to Duke, Seco, FPL, Mount Dora. These numbers are going to change. Look for them to start changing when FMPA gets up to date with the newest rates. But this is so my inclination, what's that number going to look like? Probably if it would be 127.
Okay.
Still would be below Duke, still would be below Seco, still would be above Mount Dora. So even with $10 added on there, understand everything you just said, the troubled times, inflation, yada, yada, yada. Got it. I hear you. That's why I'm not standing here saying we need to increase rates,
Right.
because we understand that. So when Brad comes in here and tells you, I need a new transformer, you guys got to tell Brad, you need to chill.
Slap that hand.
Yes. He'll figure out how to keep the lights on. That's his job.
Has Catrali responded about their unneeded transformer?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So there's another problem we haven't talked about is Catrali too.
Yes.
On the electric side of the house, I don't know how big of an impact that has. I'm not even gonna guess. We sell them about $1 million of electricity every year. So again, it's in that shade window.
Well, we don't
you
make a
know?
ton of money on it.
We don't make a
'cause they
ton of
use that
money on it, and I
rate.
think it's pretty much a pass-through. And it's really complicated with how they have a charge for when they generate and when they don't generate. Blah, blah, blah. Really, again, this is, I'm going to caveat this with we're not done our homework. We got notice a week ago that Catrali was closing by the newspaper the same way everybody else did. And so there's two parts of that component. There's the gas side, which is a little more easy to understand because it was a transportation rate. So yeah, we got $500,000 flap in there. Catrali didn't notice us pursuant to the agreement. So we need to square up with that. But we also think that there's ways to get out of that transportation agreement where we'll probably be held whole. Because they're going down in a time where the investor-owned utilities, remember 99.9% of the gas that comes through the big transmission lines isn't going to Catrali. It isn't going to LDCs, local distribution co-ops, to make your ovens and your ranges go or your hot water. It's going to make turbines spin. All that other stuff is you know the stuff that Bob does in the gas fund. It's a relatively small part. So if we got to sell, I can't remember how many therms it was. If we got to sell, you know, a couple of million therms capacity on FGT's line in the summertime, most likely somebody's going to buy that because they need that capacity for generation purposes. So that's good. But we were charging them for that service, which was gravy, and I hate to say that so bluntly, but it was. So that's about $150,000. So Bob's budget, we probably need to go back and click $150,000 out of it right now. So his black number of surplus is going to be zero because he's going to need to adjust his revenues down to. So that's the gas side of the house. The electric side of the house is a lot more complicated. My knee-jerk reaction, and again, and I had this conversation with Jim today. Jim's our contract czar, so he's been charged with pulling the contracts, dusting them out, figuring out how they affect us. Probably at the end of the day, I think we probably need to push Catrali into just a general service demand customer, or maybe an even general service customer on a commercial rate, because their inclination of what they told us they were going to serve is security lights and AC. And so on a commercial side, that could just be a GS1 customer versus even a general service one demand customer. We'll look into that. The impact that it has on this, that number I'll probably willing to say that it's not worth counting for now.
Does your bulk cost have to be, is there anything that mandates that it has to be an even number, 10, 20, 30, 40, up to 70? Can it be a variable in between? Could it be 11? like 0.11.
You're talking
instead of
about the customer
0.10.
charge?
No.
The BPCA.
The BPCA.
There is a formula there is a formula that guides what the BCPA is. It's totally formulaic. It's based on kilowatt sales versus cash on hand versus. I think we shared that chart. I didn't have it with you, me. It's not in this.
When you
but
say
it's
it's 70, is it 70.00 or is it something different?
right now it's 1 cent.
Right.
So it's
But it
point-
got up to 7 cents at one point.
It got up
right?
to 7, but so that was based on what we estimated we were going to sell minus our losses. Will we over under collect?
What I'm asking is, could it in theory be 1.5 cents?
Yes.
Is it, so it could be.
Oh yeah, it's been that way.
So why would you entertain the possibility of increasing the customer rate, which is a flat fee, regardless of how much you're using, instead of adjusting a variable rate, which would be more reflective of how much energy you're using?
Okay, because the power. So that's a good question. The power cost adjustment. The power cost adjustment is solely related formulaically to what we under or over recover in relation to how much we buy power for. The power cost adjustment doesn't pay personnel. The power cost adjustment doesn't pay debt. The power cost adjustment doesn't pay operations. The power cost adjustment pays power costs only.
It's tied to the cost of your power, or
Yes.
the consumption, or how much power you're buying.
All of that.
Okay.
The power cost adjustment is
It goes into a
tied
separate account.
to how much we buy and how much we buy it for relative to how much we have on hand.
So you talked about efficiency and how efficiency is making, generally speaking, homes more efficient. They should be using less power.
Yes.
Why is the amount of power being purchased by Leesburg dropping accordingly?
I'm going to tell you it's steady.
Now, so I get there's growth. Growth is going to offset the reduction in the household usage. But I keep going back to my college supply and demand courses, and I'm trying to figure out if the demand, because of efficiency, is starting to drop,
The answer.
including new homes, which should be even more efficient.
So, since fiscal year 16, we sold 474 million kilowatts.
Okay.
This year, we look to sell 511 kilowatts. So minus those two and then divide it by the other. And so the numbers go, I'm just going to give you it in millions, but in hundreds. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, okay? These are actual numbers. We sold 474, 461, 465, 519, 505, 514, 527, 518, 511.
That jump's probably basically for the park.
No,
No?
I'm going to tell you
You think
that
that's
jump in
later?
27 was a peak demand and heat related, weather related.
So that's about a $38 million.
Because look,
38
because
million spread between.
Hold on a second, Mark. So,
No, go ahead.
so when we saw 518, that was fiscal year 23
Oh, that was
last
23.
summer.
Okay, that was
where we
23,
saw
okay,
the
okay.
highest peaks where we broke our peak.
I
We
thought-
broke our peak to what?
Yeah, okay, sorry.
128 from.
And we're already in the
110.
90s, and it's
So,
95.
so remember, you got two.
Yeah.
You got how much you're using, and how much you're using, and how much you need at once. So if it's in if it's in water, it's how many gallons you're taking out of the pipe, and then how much pressure to push the water to you. So that's peak. So we pay for both of those charges. So you can take less water out, but at any one specific time, if you need a bunch at once, then PSI goes way up to get that water to you. So it's the same on the electric side of the house. You might use and consume a lot of KWs during the hot time, and then we've got to prepare to get you 110 megawatts at once, but then you're going to back down. So when you step back from that year, and like in that month, so in August 23, we saw a peak, a usage in August of 60 million kilowatts, but over the year, the use wasn't down. So that's those ibs and the yangs. So that's why these numbers are goofy, and your question, supply and demand, is because it's constantly changing, and it's based on multiple factors: weather, peak consumption, average usage. And we live, our wholesale contract is demand related. So the best we do is when we use lots of energy, but at one steady rate. We don't do that. We peak. So the more you peak, the more expensive our bill becomes, because you have to be prepared to provide you 120 megawatts worth of energy, but you might only use it for 1 hour out of 365 days a year.
So based on your explanation about how the money is used, is it theoretically possible that the BPCA could drop, but the customer service charge could go up?
Yes.
Because your demands are different.
Because they're not related.
So,
But all the consumer, all the homeowner cares about is the bottom line of their utility bill.
Correct.
So is it possible to offset one charge by lowering the other? You've already said it's possible.
I mean,
don't
we've
know how
done that.
feasible it
We've
is,
done
but-
that in the past.
Right.
We've said, hey, your rate's going down because, yes.
Okay.
Yes is the answer.
Our
But
operational
you don't-
costs may be going up, but our cost of purchasing electric could be going down.
Yes.
Okay,
But we can't plan on that.
understood.
to Mark's point about this idea that if rates are going up, people use more, should pay more. And given that we're, I don't know, was that like 30 some odd % below Duke, which seems that's not, one of those numbers doesn't make sense. Do we need to be looking at a new rate study?
Maybe.
Like with the inflation? Because then our new rate study would allow you to do what you're talking about, where the more if we come up with a higher rate, it's based on usage, not an arbitrary
Right.
fixed. But that would require a rate study.
Yes. And yes. And it's going to bring you back to the same answer that you don't want to hear. Rates need to go up.
But if they're going up, they would go up in a more
article-
fair way, in a way that's more controllable by the customer.
Right.
Because then you can
I
say,
think that's
And everybody's rate structure is kind of different. So it goes to that article that you sent me the other day. So Mark sent me an article the other day about the things that OUC is doing. So OUC is looking at increasing base rates. OUC is looking at changing the solar credit. OUC is looking at doing a kind of demand residential rate. So if you're a residential customer, you're going to pay more for getting AC at 3 p.m. in the afternoon than you are 9 p.m. in the evening. So those are expensive things to do. We tried to do it here, and we weren't successful at it with Smart Grid, but so that doesn't mean we don't do that again, which I think it kind of does, just because we're going to have different demographics than OUC. So I think the time that we put into trying to get that isn't going to get us to where we want to go. I lost my train of thought there a little bit. So at the end of the day, what we're seeing the industry do is try to recoup maximum back. And so when you're fighting all these different issues, solar, demand, what we're seeing the investor-owned utilities do, put it in their base charge or base charge customer charge. So guarantee yourself that up front, we know we're going to get that per month.
they're probably doing that because of solar.
I think both. More solar than anything.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
I was thinking on that whole vein,
This is my call.
when we raise prices, it can be counterproductive. I mean, I think about it in my industry, everything that I've learned about business, and I think about when the base rate went up to 7%, and I can speak for myself.
7 cents.
7 cents. Okay. I think about the demographic, and I haven't done a full market study, but I would guess that most of Leesburg's utility market is median to low income or fixed income, retirees with pensions, whatever. you take a hit like that 7 cents, unexpected or expected or not, a lot of people are going to start conserving energy. They're not as free with running the air conditioner at 75. They bumped it up to 77. They've gotten good over the past year about turning lights off and things like that. I know at Turner's, I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I'm like, shut this off. We don't need this. Where in the past, it was like wide open. Let's just, everything's good, because I was comfortable in a rate and a payment every month, and then it went up to where I was uncomfortable, both at home and at business. And now what's happened is I've gotten different habits on how I use electricity. And I don't think that raising the rates, I think if it's a base rate or the customer charge, then it's a one-time hit. It's like, dang, my electric bill went up $10 a month. And then I can go about my life and I can manage my utilities without that going up or down, and that's kind of the same. Whereas if you start raising the rates, people are going to squeeze a little bit more. Or think about saying when it's not as expensive, people are like, well, I can afford. They'll use more. You can win in volume, or you can win in the ticket price. I think about, I ran a restaurant in the Villages in 2009, and I grew that restaurant, the volume of that restaurant, to 900,000 to 4.4 million in the 2 years between 2008 and 2010. But what we did was just the opposite of what everybody else was doing. Was I lowered my price, increased the quality, and made it so attractive that people really couldn't afford to spend their money anywhere else. And you just went in volume. And I would submit that it may be worth thinking about before we raise rates or talk. I know it's potential when we're not talking about raising rates right now, but think about the fact that personally am starting to get a little bit more comfortable where the electric rates are now. I'm comfortable cranking the air conditioner down a little bit lower. I'm not freaking out when this set of lights is left on, just eating up. So I'm starting to get comfortable where you start to see usage go back up. I would imagine that I'm not the only person that's like that. That's just my 2 cents. If that makes any sense at all.
It does, and we do see that when utility rates are higher, we consume less. And that's actually a good thing for us, especially on the electric side, because if our rates are higher, we're earning more, and then we're actually going to peak lower, because you're not going to turn your AC down to 72 at 3 p.m. You're going to say, I'm just going to keep it at 78. So then the system doesn't peak as high. So then we actually, so I'm arguing the opposite of what you're saying. It actually makes us earn more money. We increase rates, you use less.
And you work less. Yeah.
And one thing that I took away, and this goes against how I would personally run it, but it was a takeaway from the blowback that we had with the $70 BPCA, is that the only one that really got brought up over and over again was our comparison to Duke, because that's the one that's around here. So everyone would bring up a Duke bill, and of course now that Duke's higher, nobody comes in and says thank you, your rate's lower. Which leads me to say, again, this is not how I would run it. Do we need to be thinking about not should our rate be Duke's, the 156? I'm not suggesting that, but should our structure follow more of Duke's, where it's more in the middle, and so it doesn't get as low or as high? Because that was, I think you pass on is what it is, but.
And then that gets into really super technical questions about rate structure. Yeah. So if you go to some investor-owned utilities, the industrial customer isn't paying their proportionate share because they're subsidizing it with residential rates. Where our utility, we spread out the costs evenly. So if we were gonna, we're gonna take it easier on the residential customer, then the industrial customer is going to go up, or flip-flop. Then we would have to increase rate. So all those are part of the pro forma that the Public Service Commission reviews when they look at investor-owned rates. We don't look at that structure as much because ours is everybody pays their share. And back to Jack's question too, we see that on the water side too. You see the inverse structure on the water. The more you use, the more you pay is designed exactly to keep you from using water over a certain amount.
Right.
I mean, that is exact. So I would argue back to you that is exactly why we want to increase rates, to prevent you from using electricity.
My thinking is just with the limited the knowledge that I have is that if you can't sell something at X amount of money except one or two, it's not creating the revenue that's needed to fuel the machine. Then you got to think about, and I can only think in terms of my business, but if I have a hamburger at $25 and only one or two people are buying it every day, but I need $300 a day for lunch to pay the staff and keep the lights on. If I lower the price of my hamburger to $15 and sell 30 of them, then I'm reaching my goals. I'm having to work a little bit harder for it, but at least I'm not $5 million of budget deficit at the end of the year.
I think one of the big variables in what you're describing, I understand where you're going with this. One of the big variables is that Leesburg Electric has no competition. You have no other choice.
Right.
You can't choose your hamburger versus somebody else's hamburger. So either you stop eating hamburgers.
Right. Well, what I can choose is the amount of
exactly
that I
consumption.
Consume. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And that's what is.
And if that's small potatoes, that's small potatoes. It may be not even worth having the discussion about it. Like say, well, that won't matter, if half of Leesburg is using a core 25% less power every year. I don't know if that would make it would matter.
Probably help.
Yeah, and so how perverse this is, and I get from a business standpoint, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
The city, in fact, they got in trouble for it and had to stop. But this was right before you, where they installed generators at Walmart and Publix.
No, that was during me.
Okay, and at peak demand, the stores would switch off of the city of Leesburg and run their own power because it lowered the city's electric bill substantially because we shaved that peak demand off. Now, of course, the other people we buy power with got pissed off because it was at their expense, but it actually saved a lot of money for people to not buy, our biggest users to not buy from us.
And so that goes to the demand side of what was happening. So the all requirements pool, the other 13 cities had calculated, I'm going to just throw a number out so it makes sense. They threw out a number that during peak time, the all requirements project needed 15,000 megawatts of power for 5 hours of the year. So when we were encouraging Walmart's times 1, Publix times 3, we were saving $2 million in our demand costs. But the pool still had that $2 million cost to generate 15,000 megawatts at 3 p.m. And so we were cheating the system because we were able to get out. Our demand meter went down. They didn't collect any money. So that $2 million got squished over to everybody else to pay. So that's the two-part component of demand use and energy use. And so that's where the pool said, Leesburg, you can't do that. And that was in the contract.
Okay.
I do think whether it's this year or next year, whenever, that it would make sense to do a rate study now that we have a board that spends a lot of time. Because I know we did one when I was on the commission, but we didn't discuss it other than briefly. If we did one,
I don't think we did.
I thought we did one.
I don't think we did.
Okay.
We did a water and sewer one that never saw the light of the commission.
Okay, maybe we
Is that
budgeted
what we
one,
did?
right?
I was just about to ask, any general idea on what a rate that study would cost?
What did we put in there? Around $100,000.
Okay, so any other questions?
So we'll have more data and information for you come July,
Well, that's what I say, the workshops are the 2nd, 9th, and 11th, so. You have to-
when's the first Monday of,
First.
Yeah, it's already the 1st, July 1st is the first Monday, but, yeah,
This was the last one that we had.
July? So the first budget workshop is July 2? So we're going to have a lot of meetings that week. So you
Well,
get
and it's
another-
also a holiday week, so
You get a-
you'd probably take that into consideration.
I'm not thinking of that.
I was about to say, I probably won't be here.
Are you guys not going to be here July 1st?
No.
Be on vacation.
Yes, I'll
Everybody
be gone.
will cancel July 1st?
Yeah.
Can we
You
move
guys-
it? Can we move it after the workshop so we have a better sense as to
Or
what
do you
comes out
want
of
to
the
meet
workshop?
before the workshop?
That's everybody
Be the
else's
last
call.
Monday. What's the
I would
last-
rather, until we have like
Just
the,
won't be here that week.
You want to
Yeah.
do the last Monday
The
in June?
8th. The 8th.
in May, or in
It's-
June,
I'll be gone the first through
the
the ninth.
24th,
Okay.
there's a commission meeting.
wouldn't it be better to meet after you guys have had your workshops? Just so we have more information?
I guess it depends on whether we want to make a recommendation to the commission or
Oh,
not.
yep. Bingo,
so-
okay.
We could do the 25th.
10, 20, we could do the 25th. That's a Tuesday. The commission meets 10/24,
Okay.
so it would be Tuesday, the 25th.
Of June.
Yes. Or give me a couple extra days and make it the 27th, Thursday. What do you guys like, 25 or 27?
25.
I was just about to say, I think 25 would work out.
Final answer.
25? So we'll go 25 at 5:30. Will you get that out, Andy? So we'll cancel July 1, and we'll do 25 at 5:30.
Okay. Okay, and again, forgive me, so I guess right now we do roll call?
Yes.
Okay, Dan?
Nothing tonight.
Mark?
I do want to just quickly take a moment. If you did not hear, our effort to create that waiver for the teachers did pass the commission. And I did want to take a moment to thank Al for doing a great job of taking sort of our little nugget and fine-tuning it into what it needed to be to pass the commission without any issue. So,
Wonderful. And Jack? Okay, meeting adjourned.
All right.
All right.
Did pass unanimously?
it was on the consent agenda with
Yeah.
no
No
poll.
poll?
Yeah.
I'm the only one that
really,
hates
you're the only
teachers.
one.